Chapter 13. The owner of the diner, Clyde Barrow, came himself just before 8 a.m. to take breakfast orders from Sarah and the feds. He had already sent them coffee twice during the wee hours of the night, sending it by way of a couple of the cops still roaming or patrolling downtown. Clyde refused to be paid. The cops reported he just wanted to do what he could to help. The cops themselves, after what had apparently been some talking to by Jonah, were not just polite to the feds, they were pleasant and even friendly. Clyde was the same, though he hadn't needed a talking to from Jonah to be that way. Breakfast would be great, Clyde. Thanks, Sarah said. We're probably here a few more hours before we're relieved by the others. Want your usual, Sarah? Yeah, thanks. What about you two agents? Whatever you want, I can cook. Robbie eyed him, this being the first time she'd actually met him. Clyde Barrow? Any relation? He grinned at her. Only cops ever ask that. Well, we sort of specialize in crime and study the history of it. Yeah, I bet you would. There is only the faintest emphasis on the you. So? Well, family lore says yes, but I've never done the genealogy thing. And he didn't have any kids, so no way I'm a direct descendant. If you really want to know, there's a technical analyst at Quantico that can get you your entire family tree in record time. Mildly, Dante said, I doubt the director would approve. Maybe not, but we both know Bishop wouldn't mind. She returned her gaze to Clyde. Our unit chief. Well, I might take you up on that, agent, later. For now, what would you like for breakfast? Sarah, who had gone back to studying a file, said absently, He makes great pancakes, and I don't know what he does to eggs, but they're to die for no matter how you want them fixed. I sing to my hens, Clyde said without a blink. Robbie believed him. Someday I'd like to be there for that, she told him. I think I'll try the pancakes. Butter, maple syrup, bacon crisp on the side. Got it. And you, agent? Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and some kind of fruit if you have it. Just whatever you got. Thanks, Mr. Barrow. I'm just Clyde, son. Be back with breakfast in a bit. Dante stared after him. I don't think he's enough older than me to call me son, he said thoughtfully. He's older than he looks, Sarah said, still absently. He's also the mayor. Dante blinked. Well, that was unexpected. Sarah glanced up with a smile. In a small town like this, the mayor would have to have another job or be retired with one paying a good pension, since the pay sucks. Clyde's on his third term. I feel like we're on ours, Dante said, surveying the stacks of file folders lined up down the center of the conference table. I mean, it looks like we've been working, and it sure as hell feels like it. But do we have anything to show for it? He had joined the other two at the conference table to read through files, saying his eyes were crossing from staring at security video over and over again, especially since he found absolutely nothing they didn't already know. Well, Robbie said, we've pretty much eliminated all the relatives and close friends of all the missing people. The only connections they have to each other, if connections exist, are reasonable and not suspicious. So, there's that. We'll probably have a new batch of files to look over when the first shift gets through their canvas of the outlying areas. Most everything else we have here has been gone through by Sarah and at least one of us, which I think covers just about all the men in the age range we're looking at who live inside the city limits. Tentative as he usually was when using his learning stage profiling skills, Dante said he abducted 6 people. We've all been operating under the assumption that those people are still alive, right? Right, Sarah said, looking up from a legal pad of notes she'd been studying. Okay. Well, Luke and Sam are the experienced profilers, but if we keep assuming these people are alive, then he has to be holding them somewhere. And it isn't in an apartment or condo here in the downtown area, or a house. Somebody would have been seen or heard something surely between his coming and going and adding to his quota. There have been cases of captives held in nice little neighborhoods for years with the neighbors none the wiser, Robbie reminded him. Yeah, but most of those cases involve kids or young women being held captive as sex slaves. He shook his head, adding a muttered, "Sick bastards." "We don't know that isn't happening here," Robbie pointed out. Sarah made a sort of choked sound. "Even the judge? Look, if it's all the same to you, I'm clinging to the notions that they're still alive and that he didn't take them for any sexual reason." "Well," Robbie said, "no evidence to the contrary. So I say your notions make as much sense as anything else. The thing is, the aerial and infrared satellite shots Bishop sent didn't show anything unusual. No heat signatures showing a group in an odd place. We were able to identify virtually every structure, and all have been searched and cleared. So where is he keeping them?" Sarah chewed on her bottom lip. 6 people held captive, some of them for weeks. We don't know why, but we do know this unsub has planned his abduction skillfully and covered his tracks in different ways, from tinkering with memories to altering security footage. He would have planned just as carefully where and how he keeps his captives. If they're alive, Robbie felt duty-bound to remind her. Yeah, but given that, Dante is right. The satellite shots don't show any unusual groupings. Our searches haven't turned up anything. And I can't think of a place downtown where 6 people could be held prisoner, especially if their captor couldn't be standing guard all the time. And he hasn't been. Unless he has a partner, his captives have been left unguarded multiple times. Luke seemed pretty certain when he checked in last night from the hotel, Dante noted. 1 unsub. So nobody to guard them when he's gone, Sarah said. Whatever safeguards he has in place, locks, soundproofing, anything else he can think of, the one thing he definitely needs to hold captives with the best chance of no one finding him out has to be isolation. And any isolated building is going to be in the outlying areas, where there's been nothing but a cursory search, Robbie noted, because all the missings disappeared in or near the downtown area. Shit, we may not be even an inch closer to identifying this unsub, and that means we're no closer to finding the missing people than we were when we got here. There is another possibility, Dante said. Robbie looked at him, brows raised. Well, Luke hasn't picked up anything from any of them, and you can be sure that at least the teenagers in Nessa would have to be terrified to find themselves captives. All of them, really. So why hasn't Luke felt that? He said he needed time, Robbie said. Yeah, but what if it isn't time? What if Luke hasn't been able to pick up anything because the unsub is keeping them drugged, out cold so they don't need a guard, and too far under to be aware enough to be afraid? Jonah slept fitfully, which didn't really surprise him. He was almost literally too tired to rest, which always sounded so absurd when other people said it, but was so real when it was you. The thing was, Jonah usually had no trouble falling asleep, so he'd never developed any little tricks or method of winding down. Sarah claimed black and white documentaries on any war of the past put her out like a light within 5 minutes. But that never worked for Jonah, not because he found war fascinating, but because he liked documentaries in general and tended to get interested. Not that interest in anything was his problem. He needed to sleep and wanted to, so he wasn't about to turn on the TV or pick up a book or magazine. He'd drawn his bedroom drapes since he and Sarah rotated shifts, and he occasionally worked a 3rd shift just because His drapes wore black out and turned his bedroom into a dark cave that mimicked night no matter what time it was. That wasn't the issue either. Jonah had never lost anyone under his command before, not even to an accident. The fact that Annie Duncan had been careless in being out, alone and unarmed, on foot in the night when everyone knows that was dangerous, didn't make him feel any better. She'd been one of his officers, his responsibility. Telling her devastated parents and younger brother about her murder had been the most difficult thing he'd ever had to do. And dealing with his other officers hadn't been much easier. They were in shock, they were grieving, they were angry, and they wanted someone to blame. He'd really had to come down hard on them to make damn sure none of them targeted their federal friends. Of course, none of them knew just why these particular FBI agents were so important, so necessary to the location and capture of the monster who had taken 6 people and killed 1 more. The monster who might have killed them all. They didn't know and he didn't tell them. That was just the sort of thing a blindly angry cop might text to a news organization. Not out of malice, but Jonah thought that if they were lucky, they had maybe another 24 hours before national media descended. National media that had been very preoccupied during the last couple of weeks by, among other things, the hunt for a serial killer in the nation's capital. Several sensational trials, at least 3 political scandals, and another senseless mass shooting, this one at a mall on the West Coast. Even with the Amber Alert on Nessa, the goings-on in Little Serenity, Tennessee, hadn't quite surfaced the attention of the national media. But they would. Right now he had a handle on the strangers in his town, a good sense of them. Once national media arrived, that one area of control would go out the window, and probably make it all that much harder to find this monster, this unsub, and capture or kill him. He was leaning heavily toward the latter. Jonah tossed and turned for probably a good 2 hours. Before exhaustion finally claimed him, he slept hard, which wasn't all that restful, but then he hadn't expected anything else. He wouldn't have a peaceful night's sleep until this monster was no longer a threat to his town, and depending on the outcome, he might not have a peaceful night's sleep for a long time afterward. He had set his alarm, but woke with a start before it could go off at 10 a.m. as he'd intended. He turned off the alarm and turned on the lamp on his nightstand, squinting in the abrupt light. He felt as though he'd slept for years, or about 6 minutes. As usual, it took him some time to extricate himself from the tangled covers, and that hint of normality was strangely reassuring. A hot shower helped. Shaving the stubble off his face helped more, even if the face in the mirror seemed more gaunt than he'd ever noticed before. And by the time he was dressed and headed for the diner for breakfast, he felt almost human. The waitresses were bustling about, but Clyde served him hot coffee without comment, and only a couple of minutes later slid a plate with his usual breakfast order across the counter. Jonah was about to ask him if something was wrong, then reminded himself that everything was wrong. And when he glanced around the diner, it was to find it unusually packed for a Thursday morning, just before lunchtime. No wonder the waitresses were bustling. Packed with citizens of Serenity who were mostly just looking at their chief of police, some trying to be casual about it, and some unabashedly staring. Before Clyde could retreat to the back and turn Willie back up, Jonah summoned him with a slight movement of his head, and Clyde rested an elbow near Jonah's plate and leaned nearer, lifting an eyebrow. "Clyde, please tell me nothing's changed in some even more horrible way in the last 8 or 10 hours. He kept his voice low. "As far as I know, nothing's changed." Clyde's voice was low as well. Except maybe that those who didn't know about Annie Duncan last night know about her now. That's why the stairs. I imagine so. Somebody goes missing, there's room for hope. Dead is dead. And even with that tent hiding Annie's body, the details have gotten out. Damn it, Jonah muttered. Bound to happen. You know that better than anybody. And new details make the old look and feel worse. We had 6 missing. Now we've got 6 missing and 1 murdered. So maybe some of them have been murdered too. Maybe all of them. Nobody's really talking about it. But it's like the whole town's holding its breath. Yeah, I got that. They know he's a killer now, so it's natural to wonder if he's killed the people he abducted. Yeah, I don't blame them for wondering. I am too. They don't feel safe anymore. It's shaking them. I know the feeling. Clyde half nodded, then said, I took breakfast to Sarah and the 2 agents around 8:30. They all looked tired and not all that cheerful, even though the gorgeous blonde was curious about my name. Jonah frowned and then said, oh, the barrel bit. Yeah, it's only cops that ever ask about it, Clyde shrugged. There were files everywhere, but in fairly neat stacks. Sarah said it'd probably be a few hours before they were relieved by you and the other 2 agents. Asked me, they need to be relieved now, even though it's obvious you should have slept longer. I'm fine. Yeah, eat your eggs, Jonah. Jean asked that you check in at the station before joining Sarah and the feds. I take it she's fielded some calls this morning. Great. She didn't sound too bothered, so maybe the worst hasn't got out yet. Jonah nodded, though not with much hope. Okay, thanks, Clyde. Clyde returned to his kitchen, and Jonah concentrated on eating his breakfast, ignoring the holes being bored into his back. Nobody approached to question him, though he wasn't at all sure that was a good thing. Maybe they were afraid to ask. Maybe they were afraid he wouldn't have an answer. Or maybe they were afraid he would. Nessa had no real sense of time passing. She concentrated on keeping her mind still and quiet, so the blacker-than-black snake wouldn't find her. Somehow, without really being sure how she was able to do it, she pictured a smooth, dark pond with no ripples at all in the black water, and made that the quiet, motionless surface of her mind. And she slipped beneath that, hid beneath that. She didn't know how long she'd have to hide, but she knew if she came out too soon, the black snake would find her. And if he found her, she had an awful feeling that he would make sure she could never get away. She'd be lost forever, unable to ever find her way out of the dark to get back home. Jonah walked into their makeshift command center just in time to land in the middle of a conversation. I don't see how he'd be able to get his hands on enough drugs to keep them all sedated this long, Robbie was saying. All the doctors and nurses in Serenity checked out. The pharmacies and drugstores checked out. Hell, even the veterinarians did. Okay, then where do you hide 6 people who are either tied up and gagged or else making a hell of a racket? Could be a basement or a cellar, Dante offered. Sarah pondered, looked at Jonah almost absently, then said there aren't many downtown, even under industrial buildings. We aren't close to the New Madrid fault line, but this town was built after some pretty rough earthquakes hit the state a couple 100 years ago. The kind that rip apart structures and create brand new lakes. She shook her head. Bad storms. Being underground is a good idea. Earthquakes, not so much. The underground structures I know of hold necessary equipment for the buildings. Furnaces, pipelines for water and gas, junction boxes for electricity, like that. What are we talking about? Jonah asked. It was Robbie, pacing restlessly back and forth at the opposite end of the table, who answered. We were trying to come up with possible holding places for 6 people in the general area of downtown. Can you think of a place in town where you could do that and be absolutely sure no one would discover your hiding place, even with the whole town being searched? No, Jonah replied immediately. He sat down at the table in the chair closest to the door, adding, Sully took his dogs all over town, did a grid search. That was after Sean Messina disappeared. We checked every building, residential and commercial, from the roof to the foundation. Shit, Robbie said. Sarah frowned at Jonah. Why didn't you bring us coffee? He lifted his own cup in a small salute. Because you 3 are about to be relieved. I talked to Luke a little while ago, and he and Samantha will be here shortly. The last thing you need right now is more caffeine. You need sleep, all of you. Did you get any? Sarah demanded. I did. I'll admit it wasn't the best sleep I've had, but probably the best I could expect under the circumstances. How about Luke and Sam? Dante asked. Luke and Sam always sleep like the dead after using her abilities that... Luke said Sam always sleeps like the dead after using her abilities that... powerfully, or words to that effect. And he said he slept as well. They had a late breakfast at the hotel. Clyde's a better cook, but the hotel kitchen is pretty good, just so you know. We're full anyway, Robbie told him. Pancakes for me. Wow. Dante said, and I want to hear him sing to his hens, because those seemingly plain scrambled eggs tasted like manna. Really, food for the gods. Jonah shook his head slightly. Okay, now I know you all need sleep. Hours of it. That did sound weird, didn't it? Dante frowned. Would it do me any good to ask if you found anything in the file so far? Seriously, Robbie said, we didn't find anything that raised a red flag, and no solid connections between the 6 missings. I mean, citizens of the same town, and there was some overlap here and there. 2 go to the same church, 2 others the same school, 3 have the same dentist, 3 use the same real estate agent to find their apartments or condos. All the adults use the same banks. Small towns are just not good for victimology. Sarah pushed a legal pad toward him. I wrote down some stuff, less speculating, mostly a few questions we had. Whatever we really felt was useful or potentially useful is up on the evidence boards, which isn't a lot, mostly just the facts we all knew anyway. She looked at the file box in the chair beside hers and added, Sam needs to go through Annie's files and notes. If she had some kind of realization that could help us catch this guy, I couldn't find it in that box. Maybe I just didn't know what to look for. Okay. Look, you guys go ahead and take off. Sarah, don't go home alone. Tim's waiting at the station. He's supposed to work first shift today, but we didn't think you'd mind. I don't. You should all know that. In case you haven't already felt or sensed it, the whole town is beyond tense. Miles beyond tense. They had more hope before. Annie's murder made them face the possibility that all the missings could be dead. Just because we haven't found any bodies doesn't mean they're still alive. And if they are still alive, Sarah said, we can't figure out how he's doing it. It's more than 3 weeks since the teenagers disappeared. If they're still alive, he must be feeding them, somehow taking care of them, even minimally. One of our questions was the possibility of nutrition through an IV, but that means medical training of some kind, never mind the supplies needed. You can get anything online, Dante said, if you know where to look and what to ask for. You don't have to be a doc, a nurse, or have any medical training at all. Yeah, so we should probably be checking with all the delivery drivers who may or may not have noticed an unusual amount of deliveries. On the other hand, if he's been planning this, then I'm guessing whatever he needed, he got a little along ahead of... And I'm guessing whatever he needed, he got a little along ahead of the abduction so as not to arouse suspicion. It's a strangely written sentence. Anyway, which is where we keep getting stuck, Robbie said. If they're still alive and if he's taking care of them, why? What the hell is the point of it all? Jonah was about to respond, then shook his head at her. Enough for now, at least for you guys. You three go get some sleep. I don't know how much I'll be able to help Luke and Sam with the psychic stuff, but I know how to be a cop, so I'll do that. Sarah opened her mouth to say something about not leaving even Jonah alone, but then she realized, damn it, you've been bopping all over the place alone all the while telling the rest of us not to be. I don't know about bopping, Jonah said gravely, but I'm not really worried about this guy coming after me. Lucas and Samantha came in just in time to hear that, and Luke said Jonah's probably right that he wouldn't be a target for this unsub. However he views us, it's likely he sees Jonah as the one he's trying to outsmart, and odds are he won't come after him, at least not directly. Outsmart or just drive nuts, Jonah said. He noticed that Sarah was frowning and gave her a questioning look, to which she replied, I don't know. Something somebody just said in the last few minutes set off a bell, but I'm too tired to figure out what it was. She shook her head. Anyway, Jonah, be careful. Well, you guys be careful as well. Lucas frowned slightly, then said to the others, okay, our shift, you guys go get some rest. If we catch a break with the case, we'll call. Otherwise, plan to be back here around midnight. It was Thursday, not long